Complete History of David Haller, Earth 616, Part 1. David Haller is the son of Professor Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller, who later became the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom. Charles and Gabrielle Haller had an affair in Israel nearly 2 decades ago, and Charles was unaware when he left Israel that Haller was pregnant with his son. Haller concealed the fact that Charles was the father of her son, David, and Charles himself only learned that he was David's father sometime after founding the New Mutants. David was born a mutant with the potential for superhuman powers. When David was living in Paris with his mother, who was a member of the Israel Diplomatic Service, her home was invaded by a terrorist assassination team out to kill every Israeli they could find there. They murdered David's stepfather, Daniel Shamron, before his eyes. David's terror catalyzed his latent psionic powers, which he used to incinerate the brains of the assassins. However, as he did so, he found himself making telepathic contact with each of his victims, thus experiencing their thoughts and emotions as they died. The horror of all this deeply traumatized the gentle, loving David, forcing him into a catatonic state. The consciousness of the leader of the assassins, Jemail Karami, was absorbed into David's mind. Karami's consciousness merged with David's, and it took Karami years to separate his consciousness from his psychic captors. Nevertheless, although Karami regained his sense of self, his consciousness remained trapped within David's mind. Karami discovered that he somehow gained control of David's mutant telepathic power and used it to read David's mind. Karami thus discovered that David was essentially a gentle, innocent person. Karami then read the minds of Gabrielle Haller and others, and with a better understanding of those around him, decided to restore David's mind to normalcy. The terrible trauma that David had suffered had splintered David's personality into multiple personalities. Each of these personalities controlled a different psionic power, many of which are as yet unknown. Karami began reintegrating these personalities into David's core personality, which was that of a little boy desperately needing parental help. However, some of these personalities resisted Karami's efforts, and 2 proved to be particularly formidable opponents: Jack Wayne, a swaggering adult roustabout adventurer who commanded David's telekinetic power, and Cindy, a temperamental, rebellious girl who controlled David's pyrokinetic power. Wayne was especially hostile, and intended to destroy Karami's consciousness in order to preserve his own independent existence within David's mind. Karami found himself fighting a war against Wayne and the other resisting personalities in a dreamscape world within David's mind resembling a mad blend of Paris, from David's childhood memories, and Beirut, from Karami's memories. When David was in his late teens, he had gone from being catatonic to being autistic and had been placed by his mother in the care of Dr. Moira McTaggart, a renowned scientist engaged in the study of mutants, and a longtime colleague of Charles Xavier. David began to manifest his psionic abilities uncontrollably in the real world, and absorbed the psyches of 2 of McTaggart's friends, Tom Corsi and Sharon Friedlander. McTaggart summoned Xavier to her research center on Muir Island off the coast of Scotland, bringing with him several of the new mutants, including Cypher, Mirage, and Wolfsbane. David absorbed McTaggart and Wolfsbane's consciousnesses, or their astral selves, into his mind. Xavier's attempted to probe David's mind, bringing Mirage's astral self with him for assistance. David's mind then absorbed the astral selves of Cypher and Gabrielle Haller, and those of Xavier and Mirage followed them. It was just before Xavier actually entered David's mind that he learned that David was his son and that the multiple personalities called themselves Legion, after the biblical quotation mark 5:9, "My name is Legion for we are many." All of the consciousnesses that Legion had just captured retained their independent existences within David's mind. The new arrivals found themselves teaming up with Wayne and Cindy against Kurami, having been deceived by Wayne as to Kurami's true motives. However, Mirage prevented Wayne from destroying Kurami, who told her and Gabrielle Haller how he had been trying to help David. Working with the reluctant Wayne, Mirage and Kurami completed the task of restoring David's mind to near normalcy, and Mirage and Kurami returned the consciousnesses absorbed from outside, including Mirage's own, back to their own bodies. Since Kurami's body was long dead, his psyche remained within David's mind. However, Kurami was unable to integrate the Wayne and Cindy personalities into David's core persona, and so they remained separate personalities within David's mind. Wayne and Cindy sometimes spoke to people in the real world through David, as could Kurami, whose consciousness also remained an independent entity within David's mind. However, David himself was no longer autistic, and his normal, core personality was in control of his mind and body. David's dominant personality was still that of a 10-year-old boy, just as it was before he suffered the trauma. Apparently the conflict within David's mind among his splinter personalities affected his physiognomy, accounting for his unusual appearance. Perhaps one of his personalities controlled shape-shifting powers. It is not known whether or not David would have been more normal in appearance if his normal personality had retained control of his body. Some time later, an accident happened that would have killed Wolfsbane and Moira if David hadn't used his telekinetic power to save them. However, by doing this David allowed Jack to take control over his body and escape to Scotland to indulge himself. The new mutants tracked him down and fought him. Jack forced Cindy to help him. Cindy didn't like being anyone's puppet, but she didn't want to be locked up for only wanting to live. Sunspot had Magic take him and Legion into limbo, warning Jack that unless he relinquished control, Magic would remove him from Legion's mind and obliterate him. In response, Jack retreated into David's subconscious, allowing David to resume control. Months later, Muir Island was attacked by Donald Pierce and his Reavers during their ongoing campaign against Wolverine and his friends. David was in the nursery playing with Sunder and the Warpies, who were taken in when the island became a safe haven for the lost souls. Again, David reached out with his telekinetic powers, hoping to defend his friends from harm, but once more allowed Jack Wayne to reach the surface of his mind. Now in control, Wayne thought it would be cute to reshape the telekinetic shield to protect only him, leaving Sunder vulnerable to the gunfire. Jack and Cindy ran wild during the attack, doing as they pleased without any thought of the consequences, even after Freedom Force arrived to help fend off the Reavers. By snuffing out Pyro's flame at a key moment, Cindy accidentally ensured the death of Stonewall. Legion, while under the control of the Shadow King, also assaulted the elderly precog, Destiny, who had sensed him in advance and sent her protector Forge away so that he would not suffer the same fate. Legion probed Destiny's mind, only to see visions of his own uncertain future reflected in her precognitive sight. Panicking, Legion struck out with a telepathic blast and killed Destiny before she could show him any more. Legion's part in the day's tragedies remained unknown, Due to the fortifying of the island's defenses and the overall negative emotional influence of Lorna Dane's new powers, no one noticed his changes. Jack Wayne assumed control over David's body and all of his powers and decided to have some fun with the island's inhabitants. He began by imprisoning Polaris in the Mutant X detention cell, since she was the only one unaffected by her own negativity force and therefore could discover the truth about him. Jack acted like David Haller in the presence of others, and so he allowed himself to be used by Forge in an experiment to locate the missing X-Men with a Cerebro unit. Unfortunately, they made telepathic contact with something else, the Shadow King 14. For unknown reason, the Shadow King let go of his hold of the island when the new warriors and new mutants descended on Muir Island. Legion tried to use his power to reabsorb Proteus's energy from Piecemeal. Unfortunately, the depth of Piecemeal's pain telepathically bled through Legion's mind, causing him to drop his telekinetic fields. The plan fell apart when Proteus's energy burned out Piecemeal and rebirthed MacTaggert himself, who banished the heroes to a dimension of nothingness. X-Factor, who had made a failed attempt to stop Proteus and reclaim Edinburgh, were also banished. Jean Grey had been exposed to Proteus's thoughts during the fight. She used Legion and Jemail's telepathy to share the experience with everyone, showing them the peace Proteus had achieved in his incorporeal state and that his efforts to restructure Edinburgh were an attempt to recreate the same peace in the real world. Tragically, the gathering of heroes were forced to convince Proteus he could never find the same happiness in life that he found in death, so Proteus chose to die again. After returning to the Muir Island, the Shadow King, using Jack Wayne's captive, Polaris, as a nexus for negative energy, expanded his influence over the globe, pushing the darkness within humanity to the surface. The X-Men, who had just returned from space with Professor X, attempted to infiltrate the island but were quickly discovered. Legion personally confronted Storm. David Haller resisted the Shadow King's demands, but Jack Wayne was more than willing to carry out Farouk's commands. The negative influence made Wayne strong enough to access all of Legion's powers, and he shot down Storm with a combination of telepathic, telekinetic and pyrokinetic power. After the death of his primary host, the Shadow King took a new host, Legion himself, and used his immense power to unleash a devastating blast that destroyed more than 2/3 of Muir Island. The Shadow King used David's body to torment Professor X, mocking him while he thought that he was corrupting David. The Shadow King revealed that he'd merely given David self-control by healing his fractured mind, and that David enjoyed it. David's physical body was hurt by Storm and needed time to heal, so the Shadow King retreated. When the Shadow King was finally defeated and pushed from David's mind, David was left in a vegetative state. Professor X didn't want to lose his son, so he desperately searched for any trace of consciousness inside David's mind. Unable to locate any signs of activity, he reluctantly accepted that David was gone. David was consigned to an intensive care ward at a hospital in Tel Aviv, his body receiving the best of care in the hopes that his mind might someday return. Many months later, David awakened with his mind completely healed after visions of destiny urged him on towards his true destiny. For a time David faked being in a coma while using his telepathic power to link his mind to his father's dreams. In them, he appeared as Magneto to try to convince his father that if Magneto was out of the way, his dream of human/mutant unity would come true. However, David's attempts failed when Xavier refused to accept that Magneto's death would help realize his dream. Hearing this, David revealed himself and told his father he disagreed. When Mystique came to murder David for killing Destiny, he stopped pretending to be in a coma, telekinetically blasted her away, and claimed he was expecting her. Mystique fled, promising to return, and was pursued by X-Factor. Shortly afterwards, Gabrielle Haller was shocked and overjoyed when David called her mother, thinking that her son was finally whole again. David fainted again and in his mind made a tombstone for his splinter personality while having another vision of destiny. When he awakened he seemed incoherent, and when his mother brought Forge to help him, he was gone. When David found Mystique battling Forge and Wolfsbane he stopped them so he could deliver Destiny's message to Mystique. He then teleported X-Factor away, saying they needed to be somewhere else. When Mystique questioned David, he said he would fix everything and make it all better before flying away. David flew to Negev Desert where he had another vision of Destiny. In it she claimed it was his destiny to heal the rift between humans and mutants, thus making the world as his father had always wanted. Believing the visions, he started to construct a psychic bunker. In an effort to learn his goals, the military sent vehicles into the dome David constructed only to have them destroyed. Gabrielle Haller contacted the X-Men for help. Failing to enter David's bunker, the X-Men's Blackbird was caught in a telekinetic field. David claimed to be happy to see his step-siblings, thinking they were there to support him. Legion told the heroes to say what they wanted, but to watch their tone as he was no longer insane. Jean Grey tried to convince him that he was still not fully healed, but David disagreed. The young mutant insisted that he was whole at last and that he would complete his father's work. When Storm questioned him again, David pulled her through a time portal, arriving at the moment her parents perished. David told her she could save them, which she tried to do, only to be wrenched back to the future. Storm claimed that what she saw was an illusion, but David insisted it was real time travel and that she simply was not fast enough to save her family. Realizing what Legion was trying to do, Storm asked Psylocke to link her mind with Bishop, who had just tried to absorb Legion's energy, and a moment later the mutants were dragged to the past with David. An alternate future dubbed the Age of Apocalypse was created when Legion went back in time to kill Magneto before he could oppose Xavier's dream, but instead inadvertently killed Xavier himself. Only Bishop remembered the proper timeline, so he traveled to the moment of Xavier's murder and used Legion's own power to create a Sonic loop, forcing the young mutant to see the damage he had caused. The energy released by this event was so intense that David apparently died. Since Bishop had prevented Legion from killing Xavier, the normal timeline was restored. After Bishop's attack, Legion disappeared into somewhere called the No Time. Here David encountered and absorbed psyches of many others, splintering many more times to create hundreds of new personas. Eventually David was able to bring himself back to Earth near Westcliff, Colorado. Here David met Marcy Sable. She helped David, gave him water and played games with him. Unfortunately, one of Legion's murderous personalities emerged, killed the girl and absorbed her psyche into Legion's mind. After embarking on a mission to investigate a report of mutant activity in Colorado, Danielle Moonstar and Karma went missing. Karma attempted to reach out psychically for Marcy and ended up trapped in Legion's mind. Meanwhile, Moonstar was arrested upon learning of his former teammate's disappearance. Cannonball formed a team to investigate, consisting of Sunspot, Magic, and Magma. Cannonball and Sunspot found Karma's unconscious body in a backroom at a bar. Meanwhile, Magic and Magma found Karma's mind inhabiting Legion's body inside a metal box kept in the cellar of a private residence. While the rest of the team was battling Legion's body and numerous evil personas, magic entered Legion's mind and killed Jack Wayne with her soul sword. After finding Karma, Marcy brought the girls to the cell holding David. The four then gained possession of a Moira doll and thereby gained control of David's body. Before leaving David's body, however, Karma used Magic's soul sword to kill the persona who murdered Marcy. Emma Frost and Cyclops arrived soon afterward to help transport Legion and to clean the minds of the civilians. Once on Utopia, the X-Club along with Rogue and Danger, began repairing David's mind by cataloging and trapping the other personalities one by one.